SRAM has a brand new Apex group. It's the 4th tier group from SRAM: Red, Force, Rival, Apex, and it comes in 4 different configurations with mechanical and electronic shifting options, with hydraulic braking in Explorer and Eagle drivetrains. They are all 1x systems. But the big news, at least for me, is the fact that you will now be able to get electronic shifting, hydraulic braking gravel bikes in the $2,500 to $4,000 range. You may even see some outliers, like say from Canyon, bikes with electronic shifting as cheap as maybe $2,000. In a day and age when many gravel bikes are north of $10,000, this is exciting. In this video, I want to talk about the details of the group, 4 configurations, how they compare to SRAM's other offerings, how the Apex group compares to offerings from Shimano and Campy, and I want to give you my ride impressions. I was invited to the launch in Galena, Illinois, along with a dozen or so other journalists from around the world, and I got to ride this Axis Explorer electronic group and the mechanical Eagle group. This video is sponsored by Perc Coffee, which allows me to continue doing what I love, which is give you my unbiased take on groups like this SRAM Axis. If you want to save 15% on some delicious coffee, I like the dark Juggernaut roast. You can use the code RIDE15 at perccoffee.com. Folks at Perc are cyclists themselves and are supporting many cycling initiatives and clubs, and now the ride. So thanks to Perc. Thanks for watching. Now let's dig into the details of this new SRAM Apex group. First, a quick overview for those of you not familiar with SRAM's various shifting systems. There are 2 component giants in the world, Shimano and SRAM. When SRAM came out with its double tap shifting, that was a mechanical system where 1 click would move the gear down 1 cog, and 2 clicks pushing the lever further would move it up the cassette. That shifting technology still exists. Now SRAM also has what was initially called E-tap, which is silly simple. You press the right lever, it goes that way into a harder gear. You press this lever and the derailleur moves up the cassette into an easier gear. On 2x bikes, where you've got a front derailleur, when you press both levers, that shifts the front derailleur. The Apex group is a 1x only group. It's aimed at gravel. So there is just the single ring, and therefore each button just does 1 single task. That was called E-tap when it came out. Now it's just called Axis. And my dog Barry is wanting to weigh in on the conversation here. Axis can also be used for other things, like say you've got a dropper post. You can configure the buttons like that double press to work with the dropper post. So with the new Apex, you've got both options. You've got 1x mechanical, and you've got the Apex Axis, the electronic wireless version. The new Apex group is aimed squarely at gravel, which is great because that is where I aim on many of my rides. All 4 Apex configurations are 12-speed, and for chain rings, you've got the choice of 38, 40, 42, 44, and 46. The 40 is what is on here, and that is often the main spec options for many brands. Further, you've got a few different configuration options in the back. SRAM, with its 12-speed, went to a small 10 cog, but that means you've got to have a 12-speed specific wheel with the SRAM driver. With this new Apex group, you can go down to the 10, but you can also get cassettes that have a 11-tooth small cog. Why would you want that? Well, so you can use it with an existing 11-speed wheel, and we may well see 11-speed wheels with the new Apex and that 11-tooth small cog from a few manufacturers. Both the Explorer and the Eagle options require their own cassette, derailleur, and chain. The Explorer comes in 1036 1044 and 1144 options. The Eagle, the big boy, comes in 1052 and 1050 options, as well as, you know, an 1152. Let's talk about similarities and differences between the SRAM Apex group and its three elder siblings, Rival, Force, and Red. Much of the functionality is the same. In fact, the electronic bits inside the shifters and at the rear derailleur are exactly the same, SRAM says. Like with many groups, whether it's Shimano or Campy or SRAM, the primary difference is in materials used. Basically, the cheaper the group, the heavier it is, and the less expensive the materials used are. The finish is also a bit different. So that's, you know, the visible difference. I've often joked with some of the higher end groups that the only way to tell a difference between the two is with a scale or with your wallet, meaning that when your hands are on the levers, it feels quite similar and the shifting will feel similar. Now with mechanical groups, you certainly could tell and can tell a difference between, like, say, a Shimano Dura Ace group and a Shimano 105 group. Those definitely feel different. So in addition to the wallet and scale tests, you know, the tactile tests will tell you that something is different. Here, this shift functionality feels the same as the other groups. The shaping is a scooch different, but in my mind, it's even better because the hood is smaller than the Red and the old Force. Force has just been upgraded to a shape much like the Rival. So this feels great. And in fact, underneath the hoods, it feels better than the outgoing Force and Red, where on, let's see, I've got one of these sitting around. On those top groups, there's like a bit of a hard edge underneath the hood there, where like an empty space in the plastic could be grating on your hand. Not that you would dig up in there, but that's just something that always kind of bugged me, still bugs me about those groups. This feels better. Finish-wise, this group doesn't look as premium as Force or Rival, but it doesn't look bad. It just looks pretty utilitarian. The most noticeable visual differences, to my eye at least, are at the derailleur and then at the crank, which is a metal crank. Down here at the crank, you got another great thing. Power meter insert for $200. That is a great deal. That's something I'm super excited to see. The spindle and the left crank arm come as one unit, and that is a $200 upgrade. How accurate is it compared to others? I don't know. I haven't had time to test it out. I'm sure Ray over at DC Rainmaker will do a great job in comparing this to other meters on the market. I'll play around with that a bit myself, and when I do a full review down the road on this group, that will be one of the things that I'm looking at. But at first blush, seems to work great, and it's awesome to have that at a fourth tier group level. Again, on bikes that could be had for as little as $2,500 or maybe even less from a consumer direct brand. So super cool to see. Another thing that is similar to other groups is the blips, wireless blips. In addition to shifting here, you've got two wee little buttons underneath that act the same way. You know, you press this one, shifts it that way, press this one, shifts it that way. You can put those anywhere you like. These are wireless. SRAM moved away from the wired blip that had like more like a doorbell shape in favor of something that is more like the Shimano shifter, which is a much smaller little button. But you can tuck those guys wherever you like because they're wireless. Again, cool thing in my book, especially if you like putting on, you know, aero bars. You can shift at the ends of the bars. Another difference I should note is the brake calipers are a little more difficult to bleed than SRAM's latest and greatest. The material of the rotor is also a heavier material than on the top end. So still, to my sense, work just fine. It's just a heavier system and takes a little longer to work on. Let's talk comparisons to other groups, other gravel groups. Shimano has the GRX family, with Di2 GRX being only at the tippity top. GRX Di2 is the wired version, electronic version, and then the GRX groups underneath are mechanical. So here again, SRAM having 4 wireless electronic shifting groups at a variety of price points definitely has a leg up on Shimano. Campy has the ECAR 13-speed group, only mechanical. So again, SRAM, if you're looking for electronic shifting, SRAM is your go-to over the Italian manufacturer. Which begs the question, do you need electronic shifting? Well, you don't need anything. You don't necessarily need 12 by, you don't necessarily even need a bicycle. These are fun, for many of us, recreational toys. Yes, you can use them for transportation. I do. Don't at me about that, but need is not necessarily the question here. I'll give you the pros and the cons of electronic shifting compared to mechanical in my book. One, the simplicity of use, especially the SRAM's group, is great. The reliability, as long as you change your battery, we'll come to that, charge your battery. You're never going to have cables stretch or clog with mud. Once you've got it set, as long as you're not bending up the bike, this will always shift the same way on day 400 as it does on day 1. That is a great thing. Being able to shift in multiple places, like I was saying with the wireless blips, super cool thing. The primary downside to the thing is that you can, and people do, neglect to charge the battery. And then you get caught out with now a single speed. This is preventable, of course. There's a couple things you can do. One is the group tethers into most modern head units, so you get an alert saying, hey, battery's low. And in my experience, if I see that on any one ride, even if it's a 3 or 4 hour ride, the battery alert popping up, I can finish the ride like normal, then charge the battery overnight, and then you're good to go the next day. Another option is to bring a spare battery with you, so if and when your battery dies on you on the ride, you're good to go. I have had all 3 systems, SRAM, Shimano, and Campy. They don't have a gravel electronic group, but they're Super Record road group. I have had all 3 of those fail on me in different ways. SRAM, I've had the little tab on the battery, on one particular battery, wear out. That battery just had to be replaced, but until that was fixed, I could only shift intermittently as there wasn't a strong contact between the battery and the connection at the derailleur. I've also had a junky battery. Belgian waffle ride at Utah. I had a battery that I thought was charged all the way, die on me after like an hour the day before the race, and I made sure to charge it overnight for the race, and then partway through the race, the thing just stopped shifting. A gentleman on course was nice enough to let me borrow his battery to move the cassette, move the derailleur across the cassette at the top of a climb before we descended. And then I put my battery back on, and then it came back to life like 30 minutes later, rattling along. So that was the case of a bad battery. This is something you would not have in a mechanical system, right? With Di2, I've had cables come apart, whether it's like where it's plugged into the shifter and the shifter gets rattled down over riding over rough road, and that connection is broken, therefore that won't shift. I've had the battery that has been up at a seat post fall down, and then it's a pain to extract the thing. And of course I've had Di2 batteries die on me. And then the third foible with Campanilo's system at the Campaniolo Gran Fondo, New York, ironically enough, the system became waterlogged, and I ended up with a single speed after it ghost shifted for a while, and then eventually just died on me. So electronic systems, like mechanical systems, like anything on earth, can fail and can go sideways. However, mechanical systems can fail, right? In addition to the wear and tear on cables where you have to tune the cables periodically as they stretch, cables can eventually fray and snap. I've had that happen with all three systems, or all three component maker systems. Cables wear out, right? So both systems are not perfect and infallible, but I like electronic shifting just because it's super easy. It's sort of like, you know, you used to crank up your windows in your car by hand. Nothing wrong with that system, works perfectly fine, but now that we've got little buttons to drive your windows, why would you go back? Now, some people talk about missing the feel, the tactile sensation of shifting, sort of like, you know, driving a manual car versus having an automatic car. I can appreciate that. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I like how electronic feels. Another thing that I love about electronic systems is how they free up some space at the cockpit. By having less stuff in the hoods, you've got more space for your hand. So this is most notable for me in Shimano system, where the mechanical version, I can get 2 fingers in easily, whereas with the Di2 system, I can get 3 fingers in, and this is a 3-finger fit here with the Apex. So just the ergonomics and daily use, I dig the convenience. So that's my pitch for electronics. One point of note for Di2 GRX is that you can get a 2x. You can get a front derailleur with that system. I personally do like having a 2x, and that you get a big range and then you get smaller steps in between the gears, and you can still make that big move to small ring or big ring as you go, you know, up and over riser. So that's, in my book, an advantage Shimano has over SRAM axis, at least here with this Apex 12-speed group. And Campy, while there is no electronic group, it is the world's lightest gravel group with the 13-speed Ekar. Let's talk weights. Again, the cheaper the price, the heavier the weight. This Apex Explorer Axis group comes in at just under 3,000 grams. This is quoted at 2,976 grams in the Axis version. The mechanical version is just a few grams lighter, 2,872 grams. Of course, the configuration of the cassette and the chainring can affect that by a few grams here or there, but that's a ballpark figure for you. Compare that to the Rival 1x, which is a little bit lighter at 2,776 grams. As you go up in price, it costs a few more $100, and it's a few 100 grams less in weight. Speaking of the shape of the hoods, I should note that the mechanical version got an overhaul. There's the SRAM Rival 1x, tried and true. It's 11-speed, has a much bigger hood. That was developed 8 or 9 years ago or so. So the new Apex mechanical, which I wrote on a checkpoint, has a slightly slimmed down shape. Not as svelte as this guy, but smaller than the existing Rival 1x. SRAM built this test bike with this Lauf Sigla. Existing Sigla with Rival axis is on their website now for $3,140. How much will this group shave off this price? I don't know exactly, but it'll certainly bring it under that $3,000 mark. The electronic groups are just under $1,200, and the mechanical groups just under $1,000. Let's talk more ride impressions. I already told you about how the things feel in hand, right? Both the shape of the levers and also the tactile sensation of shifting. There's the auditory experience of the group. For me, It's a little bit louder than the higher end groups. Some of that you could chalk up to the megaphone that the 1144 cassette acts as, you know, this big echo chamber back there. I like the fact that you can hear the shifter shift. Just gives you another sense that you did in fact depress the button, as well as the tactile sensation of the button popping back up. So noise there, I like the noise at the back. I could do with a little bit less, but that's not the worst thing in the world. You can shift under power. That's not necessarily advisable, and I've conditioned myself over years not to shift under load. We've seen with the advent of e-bikes, chain makers making stronger, heavier chains for that application, just because you just introduce a lot of torquey forces when you or your motorized bike are really yanking on the chain and it's shifting across the cogs. That's not the ideal situation for the chain. That said, you know, you can be standing up out of the saddle and the bike will shift fine up and down the cassette, both with the axis and with the mechanical group. The mechanical group doesn't shift perfectly every single time, and some of that, if not all that, could be up to user error, right? With the double tap, you know, that single press takes it down. That's pretty easy to do. Getting it past that first press to the second click, sometimes you'll miss that, you know, whether you're out of the saddle or you've got sweaty hands, you're just not paying attention or whatever. Sometimes you don't get quite to that second click, so the chain will skip around a little bit and it won't fully engage. So for me, that's just like another reason why I like electronic shifting, because there it's pretty binary. You either hit the thing or you don't hit the thing. With the mechanical group, you can get some grind it till you find it, like a new driver in a manual transmission car. This has a 40 ring and that 1144 instead of SRAM's normal 12-speed 1044. A 4011 is not a very big gear. A 40 by 44 is very low for climbing, but 4011, when the road tips down, you can spin out pretty easily. So for my taste, I'd like a 42 or a 44 ring. That's certainly, you know, an option you can get, just might not be a stock option on a bike. Braking feels great. I love how easy hydraulic braking is. I was just coming down Magnolia this morning with a friend, a very steep climb here in Boulder with pitches over 20%. I remember coming down that on rim brakes and you're using all 4 fingers and your hands are cramping by the time you get to the bottom of the thing. With hydraulic brakes in general, you can just brake all day, nice and easy with 1 finger, plenty of power, plenty of modulation. And while I'm aware that the materials are of a lesser grade on this group than SRAM's higher end groups, the braking quality does not feel at all compromised. So there, I'm sold. You won't catch me going back to rim brakes anytime soon. You know, especially because you can, rim brakes limit the amount of tire clearance you have. So in addition to the braking qualities, by going with disc brakes, you can run big fat gravel tires. So no back stepping there with the SRAM Apex group. Another minor gripe I had with the mechanical Eagle group was just the presence of rattly cables. I was testing a Trek Checkpoint aluminum bike, great bike, but could definitely hear the cable thwacking around inside the down tube on the bike on rougher surfaces. Not a big deal, but certainly an annoying thing, and nobody likes a noisy bike, right? That could probably be remedied somehow, but when you have electronic wireless shifting, there's nothing there to rattle. So score 1 for the electronic group there. So bottom line, SRAM Apex, 4 configurations, all pointed at gravel bikes, 2 electronic, 2 mechanical. For my money, I'd go with the electronic. And what I'm most excited about is the fact that you can get electronic shifting, hydraulic braking gravel bikes in the very near future in that $2,500 to $4,000 range. So nice work, SRAM. I'll be testing this bike a lot more here on my home roads around Boulder, Colorado. Hop into an event or two and I will holler back with a full review of this group. In the meantime, as always, I thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And whether you prefer electronic or mechanical, disc brake or in brake, enjoy the ride.